In a previous video, we went on a road trip all throughout Southern California, following much of the original path of the Butterfield Stage Line. And along the way, we stopped at a lot of monuments and in some cases actual buildings that dated all the way back to the 1850s and 1860s, all of those associated with stagecoach stops. And I really enjoyed that trip. I got to see some amazing environments, some cool architecture, a lot of history, and I'm very excited to be back out in that environment. And along that journey, one stagecoach stop in particular really stood out to me. It really kind of drew me in. And I felt compelled to dive into the history a little bit more. So today I'm actually returning to that stagecoach stop to touch on some of the history, look at some more of the sites associated with it, and to see how much has changed in the past 7 months since I was last here. I am in Aguanga, California, which is a small community just north of the Palomar Mountain located in a small canyon. And this community is nestled along State Road 79, which, at least in this area, follows along much of the original Butterfield Stage Line path. And I wanted to return to Aguanga to check out an old building that dates back to the mid-1800s. And if you saw my previous video, you may remember that it is essentially taken over by nature, all but abandoned, and I'm really curious to see how much may have changed since my last visit. But the Butterfield Stage Line, which existed from 1858 until 1861, stretched over 2,800 miles from St. Louis all the way to San Francisco. And at the time, a passenger would have to pay about $200 and could bring around 25 pounds worth of equipment and baggage, which really is not a lot when you think about that they're traveling over 3,000 miles nearly, and probably not going back east. But at any rate, it existed for around 3 years, with the last run heading westward down the line in the spring of 1861. Now, the Civil War did play a large role in ending the stage line, but they also found a more direct route to the north, communications, some other issues. Really a lot played into the demise of the Butterfield Stage Line. Now, along the Butterfield Stage Line, stagecoach stops were built anywhere between 10 and 20 miles apart. And this was to give the horses, the riders, and everyone else an opportunity to rest on this journey, which of course would have been pretty arduous, certainly dangerous, and I'm sure exhausting as well. Now, our story today primarily involves two men, Joseph Gifthaler and Jacob Bergman. In the 1850s, a man named Joseph Gifthaler owned this entire area and he managed a ranch. And when the Butterfield Stage Line came through, he actually also managed the stagecoach stop here. By the mid-1860s, a German immigrant named Jacob Bergman came onto the scene. Now, Jacob Bergman was a fascinating man. He immigrated from Germany and by 1858 had settled in San Francisco, California, where he enlisted in the American Army. When the American Civil War broke out, Jacob fought for the Union Army and was wounded at the Battle of Williamsburg in 1862. He was eventually discharged and made his way back out west, where he ran mail between Yuma and Los Angeles for a time. It was during those years that Jacob became familiar with the Aguanga area and these valleys in and near Temecula. By the mid-1860s, Jacob Bergman came to Aguanga and became a business partner of Joseph Gifthaler. And by 1867, when Joseph passed away, Jacob had acquired the entirety of the ranch. And throughout the 1870s, Jacob continued to manage the ranch as well as a stop here along a continuously common route for people to take. Now, standing alone on the edge of this field in a grove of trees is this abandoned structure, likely dating back to the 1850s. This structure was possibly used as a stagecoach station and it was certainly used by Jacob Bergman in the late 1800s as his ranch house. And what's amazing to me is that it remains here, essentially untouched and left to be taken over by nature. So just as before, we're going to go in, explore the building and the grounds, and just be careful not to alter or damage anything. As I was doing research prior to my visit here, I read an article from a few years ago in which a woman who is the great-granddaughter of Jacob Bergman, who still lives here in Aguanga, stated that this was the remains of his former ranch house from the 1800s. It didn't give an exact year on it, but it does confirm from an actual family member that these are the remains here on the former ranch owned by Jacob Bergman. Of course, a lot of updates have been made throughout the years. I recall seeing electrical outlets in here, which I believe became more commonplace in structures by the 1930s, but I'm sure they had done updates if people were living here to make it accommodating, just as we do today. Here off in a side room, we see that the roof is still caving in as it was before. Thankfully, nothing has really collapsed, and we see quite a bit of the floorboards also missing here. We're gonna go and watch our step. Come in here and check out what remains of Jacob Bergman's former ranch house and likely former stagecoach stop from the 1850s and 1860s. I really do love these built-in shelves here. Might have to remember that, build that into my own house. But a lot of droppings, presumably from rats. And it looks like this may have been a kitchen, perhaps, because we have a faucet and a sink. And here we see a lid to either a mason jar or some sort of jar. And like I mentioned before, there are electrical outlets, which I'm assuming this structure was, of course, retrofitted with to keep up with the times since people lived in here into the 1900s. But yeah, I think this would have been the kitchen, because I imagine this would have been a pantry to either store food or jars of food or even maybe bowls and plates. And we have some more storage down here. But this is completely taken over by nature. Just off of what I believe is the kitchen, this space is completely blown out. Try and cross over here. This would have likely been a bedroom or maybe a dining room of some sort. And just seeing some of that original coloring here. This case, it's like a yellow-orange. Also painted on the ceiling. And I didn't notice this last time, but the ceiling itself is just these kind of wood panels, at least the ceiling for the room. It's like a false ceiling, and then it looks like you may have had essentially an attic up there where the ceiling sloped, or where the roof sloped rather. Here we see that closet and a step down into this other room, which I believe would have been a bedroom at some point, especially because they definitely have, looks like a closet. They got a hanger here still, some more storage. But this room, I really love this color. It's almost like a turquoise or a teal. And that paint's really coming off, just weathered by the dry air and the sun and the high winds that tear through this valley. This is amazing. And just trying to really take in and admire this architecture. It's, you know, pretty simple, especially being an old Western building, but you have this molding around the door frame itself. Really nothing left of the door. And then this front room here. Wow. Quite the view. All right, that's most of the interior. I do want to check out some of the exterior portions. This, I guess, would have been a patio, some sort of overhang, protection from the sun, certainly. but just a nice spot where you could come relax. And there's a step. There's a step back here, so I kind of want to see where this leads. I did not check this out last time, but be very careful because there's quite a bit of barbed wire still laying around. And here we are on the other side of the structure. See the exposed wood, not painted or anything. And this is interesting. Just off the side, we have a stone wall, presumably made with just stones you would find in the fields here. All local rocks, just grabbed by hand. I'm not sure what this portion of the structure was used for. Maybe it was part of a cellar or just some kind of storage to keep it cool in the hot summer days. It almost looks like there's a step here too. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas or knows what this was used for, but it's right off the edge of the building here. Very interesting. Again, we're looking here at the back of the structure, and off in that direction is State Road 79, which would have been the Butterfield Stage Line trail. But I want to walk a little bit around here just to see different perspectives of the building, but also to see what else might be here on the grounds, because I don't know how well it's coming out on camera, but these views are absolutely amazing. And right now we're looking off in the direction of Palomar Mountain, in that mountain range. And it looks like there's a little trail up this hill. Maybe we'll go up, get a different vantage point. But it's so quiet and really peaceful back here. And this looks like an old cistern and system to likely either capture rainwater or maybe have well water here for the house. Oh yeah, this is the view up here. You can see down there on the bottom left is the old structure and this open field beyond it, stretching all the way over to the road where you see the cars going by. That is, again, State Road 79, which followed the former path of the Butterfield Stage Line. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and descend down this little hill. So hopefully going down is going to be a little bit easier than the way up. And as we go down, we'll be able to take in some more of the views of that awesome mid-1800s structure. As long as I don't fall and tumble down. At least I'll capture it on camera. I do remember from last time this historic marker, which is actually in much better shape today than it was last summer. It's actually legible. And this placard reads, Aguanga Butterfield Overland Mail Station, 1858 to 1861. The first westbound coach passed this swing station on October 6, 1858. Later, it was called the Dutchman's, after Jacob Bergman, stage driver, station keeper, soldier, and rancher who settled here. To all the keepers of such lonely stations, this plaque is dedicated. And this was dedicated on October 5th, 1958, which would have been essentially the 100-year anniversary of the first time that a westbound coach passed this site. And something on here that I really want to highlight is that it's dedicated to all the keepers of such lonely stations. And it's pretty desolate out here today in 2025. Just imagine what it would have been like out here in 1858. Other than the occasional stagecoach that passed by and stopped for a few hours or maybe the night, you were out here all alone, either by yourself or, maybe if you were lucky with your family. Maybe not lucky for them, and interactions with other people. Perhaps you had some neighbors, some other ranchers living nearby. Perhaps you interacted with the Luiseno Indians and other native people that lived in the area, but this would have been a very, very lonely existence. And it is amazing that this structure is still standing out here in this field, just left here. And I really do appreciate being able to come check it out. And I'm thankful to be able to bring you all with me to show you, because it is a really unique structure and such a beautiful piece of American history. Now, Jacob Bergman was a really influential man here in Aguanga and in the region. In 1870, he served as the Justice of the Peace for Temecula Township, and he also established the first U.S. post office here in Aguanga. And at one point, he also served one term as a San Diego County Board Supervisor. So Jacob, came from Germany, immigrated to the United States, fought in the Union Army in the American Civil War, made his way back out west, and started to have a major impact on his local community. So really the American dream, quite the success story. And, his impact here certainly is probably felt by a lot of people around that may not even realize it, but not enough people know about men like Jacob Bergman. While he was doing all those other cool things, he was still managing his ranch here throughout the 1870s, 1880s, and even into the 1890s. But in 1894, Jacob Bergman died here on his ranch, and he is laid to rest here alongside his wife. And it's a cool, small little gravesite actually across of State Road 79, where the old stage line would have ran through. And we're going to go check out his family cemetery now. One thing I didn't mention is that in order to get back to this old structure, you don't necessarily have to, but you should walk across this very long field. And I say that because the property that actually has the road that you could drive down to it is private property. So just trying to be respectful of them as best I can and not drive down their road. But there are a couple ways to get to it, but neither of them are necessarily easy. And these longhorns are absolutely beautiful. And this is at the farm that's actually adjacent to the property, but beautiful animals. And they look very curious to see me. Phew! I feel like I've been walking forever. And let me tell you, it's only in the upper 50s here, but in that direct sun with really no wind. I'm also wearing a flannel, so I guess that's on me, but it feels much warmer out here, but almost there. This here is State Road 79, and this, at least in this portion, follows the exact path of the Butterfield Stagecoach line. And way off there in the distance, nestled up against the side of the mountain there, is the building we were just checking out. So again, a nice little walk. There, just off in the distance, within that metal fencing, you'll see two headstones, and one of those is to Jacob Bergman and the other to his wife. And it looks like they also have a historical marker in there. It is actually fenced off, again, on private property, it looks like. So I don't want to trespass, but those are the graves of Jacob Bergman and his wife. Again, he essentially owned all this land by around 1867 until his death in 1894. I think it's important to tell the history and the legacy of men like Jacob Bergman and those families who came out here and made pretty large and influential contributions to this country, even if it was in their own small way, maybe in their community. But today has been pretty cool to come back and see some Old West history that I've seen before, and to see how it's changed, or in this case, really how it's not changed, which is, a good thing. And yeah, that's going to be it for this one, though. Now it's on to the next journey.